All right, let's get into it. We're going to break down this incredible story about a massive government contract that just completely imploded. And the craziest part? It all came down to one single number. This is the case of ASQ Solutions versus the U.S. Navy. So how can a single number in a contract possibly lead to a full-blown legal showdown? I mean, it really does sound like something out of a movie, right? But this was a real case. You've got a company's entire future and millions in taxpayer money hanging in the balance, all because of a dispute over one simple digit. And here it is, the number 20. Yup, that's it. This single number was the time bomb at the center of this whole mess. It's what brought a major government contract to a grinding, screeching halt. Okay, let's set the scene here. A contract in default. So ASG Solutions, they land this big contract to provide some really critical engineering services down at the Naval Air Station in Jacksonville. Sounds great, right? Well, they're only about 6 months into a year-long deal when, bam, the Navy just pulls the plug. So why'd they do it? The official reason was something called a termination for default. Now you have to understand, in the world of government contracting, that is a huge deal. It's like getting a scarlet letter branded on your company. It's not just, hey, this isn't working out. It is the government publicly declaring you failed. So you gotta ask, what could have possibly gone so wrong? It all boiled down to a pretty simple staffing requirement. The contract said ASG needed to provide a team of 20 qualified professionals. 20! But halfway through the contract, they only had 4 people on site. 4! I mean, do the math. That's a staggering 80% shortfall. Just, wow. Now you might think ASG was in deep trouble, but they didn't just roll over and accept this. No way. They went on the offensive. They took the government to court, challenging the whole thing with 3 main arguments that they hoped would save not just the contract, but their entire reputation. So here was their 3-pronged attack. First, they said, hey, Navy, you are reading the contract all wrong. Second, they made the pretty bold claim that the contract itself was actually illegal. And third, they basically accused the Navy of making the whole thing up, saying the staffing issue was just a bogus excuse to kick them to the curb. And this right here, this is really the heart of the whole dispute. You see, from ASG's point of view, they were supposed to be like an on-call team of experts. You only bring them in when a specific task is assigned. But from the Navy's perspective, they were paying for a dedicated team of 20 professionals to be there, ready to go at all times. I mean, these two views are just on completely different planets. And that's where everything started to unravel. Now, that second claim about the contract being illegal, that was kind of a legal Hail Mary. They argued it was what's known as a personal services contract, which is a big no-no in government work. Basically, the government isn't allowed to hire contractors to act like regular government employees. It's designed to stop them from creating a kind of shadow workforce and getting around all the official hiring rules. And then there was that third claim, accusing the Navy of acting in bad faith. ASG was essentially saying, you guys just wanted out of this deal and you manufactured this whole staffing problem as an excuse to do it. So was the Navy's termination fair, or was it just a pretext to end the contract? That serious accusation is what sent this whole thing to court. All right, let's get to the main event, the court's final word. The judges had to look at all these arguments and dig into the evidence from both ASG and the Navy to figure out who was actually right. So, on that first point, the whole misinterpretation argument, the court didn't mess around. They went straight to the source, the contract solicitation itself. And the language was, well, about as clear as it gets. It said, and I quote, the staff of 20 professionals is base/minimum level of service. The court basically said, look, minimum means minimum. It doesn't mean sometimes or up to 20. It means 20. But then came the real knockout blow. The court pulled out a little something from ASG's own bid proposal, the document they used to win the contract in the first place. In it, they promised, quote, our proposed 20 FTE all-senior team. And FTE, as you probably know, stands for full-time equivalent. Oof. They were caught by their own sales pitch. Their own words came back to absolutely convict them. And what about that illegal contract claim? Yeah, the court shut that down pretty fast too. They pointed to parts of the contract that were super clear. ASG was in charge of its own people. ASG had to control, direct, and supervise its employees, not the Navy. Sure, the Navy could check their qualifications, but they weren't their bosses. So, not a personal services contract. Case closed on that one. And as for the idea that this was all just some surprise pretext, well, this timeline totally demolishes that argument. The court found that the Navy didn't just suddenly drop the hammer. They had this perfect paper trail. First, a letter of concern in November. Then, a cure notice in December, basically saying, fix this. And finally, a show cause notice in January. They gave ASG multiple chances to get their act together. That documentation was the final nail in the coffin.
So with the evidence just piling up against them on every single one of their claims, the verdict was pretty straightforward. The Federal Circuit Court sided completely with the government, affirming the earlier decision. ASG lost. The termination was deemed 100% legal and totally justified.
So, after all that, what's the big lesson here? Why does this case matter for anyone who does business with the government? Well, this is what we might call the government contractor's playbook. The lessons from this whole saga are crystal clear. First off, plain language wins. The court is going to read the words on the page and enforce them. Second, your bid becomes your bond. Whatever you promise in your proposal, you better be ready to deliver because it is binding. Third, minimums are mandatory. It's not a goal, it's a hard requirement. And finally, for the government side of the aisle, document everything. That paper trail is exactly what proved the Navy acted in good faith. And that really brings us to the big final question, doesn't it? If your promises become your obligations, what are you promising in your own work? This case is a huge reminder about accountability, and it applies to way more than just government contracts. It's about saying what you'll do and then actually doing it. And hey, just a quick reminder, as always, this is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This is not legal advice. Thanks so much for tuning in.